my channel, The Fancy Hat Lady Reads. I am wearing one of my fancy booktube hats. I have been here on this channel for 9 years, and this is the Get to Know My Taste tag. This tag was created by Sam from Thoughts on Tomes and Mari from My Name is Marirez. I will link both of their channels down below. There's also, I think they're putting together a playlist of people's videos to help people find new booktubers, which is really cool. This tag has 15 questions, and it's all about getting to know a booktuber and their reading taste, and how they rate and review books. I have printed out the questions here to go off of, and right away, right at the top, I am going to take some liberties and rearrange the order because I need to answer question number 4 first. Question number 4 is, do you have a genre niche? And the reason I am moving this to the very beginning of the video is because if this is the first video of mine you've ever watched and you don't know me, you deserve to know right off the bat that at present, this is a fantasy and science fiction channel. It was not explicitly a fantasy and science fiction channel when I started it 9 years ago. And it may not always be. I haven't rebranded to a channel name or something that is more explicitly SFF because I want to leave open the option that my reading might shift to be more inclusive of other genres in the future. But for several years now, I hesitate to figure out exactly how many. I have been almost exclusively an SFF reader. Now, what do I read within SFF? I read, honestly, pretty broadly within both fantasy and science fiction. I read more fantasy than science fiction right now. That's not necessarily because I strongly prefer it. It's just sort of how it's been shaking out in recent years. I think publishing trends have something to do with this. I understand the boundaries between these two genres to be porous. Whatever I like in one should theoretically be possible to find in the other as well. And I think part of the reason I've managed to get so deeply stuck in the single genre rabbit hole of SFF is that they are such expansive, limitless, boundless genres, or genre, depending on whether you consider it to be one or two genres. I believe that whatever you like in any sort of fiction genre, nonfiction is off there doing its own thing, I guess, but whatever you like in a story, you can probably find it somewhere within SFF. Someone is doing that with speculative fiction elements. And they are using those speculative fiction elements to do something interesting with that type of storytelling. And so once I started really digging into the SFF genre, I have found it so incredibly hard to want to surface and read anything else. No matter how niche I get, there's always something I want to read that is nicher. That said, there are a few subgenres within SFF I don't read much of. That's not to say I don't enjoy them sometimes, that I won't ever read them, but in general, you won't see me reading a lot of big, chunky, epic fantasy series. You know the ones I'm talking about. Now, that's not ruling them out. I have first books in a few popular ones that I would like to read. Occasionally the mood strikes me, maybe this month I will pick up a big chunky epic fantasy, and then usually that impulse dies out sometime before I can figure out which one I actually want to read and commit. Someday it'll happen. I'll get deeply invested in a big epic fantasy series, I'm sure. But that's not what you're gonna see a lot of on this channel. You're probably not going to see a lot of the science fiction equivalent of that either. Those big, chunky, long science fiction epics. I keep saying I could be persuaded possibly to read something like The Expanse. I just don't know why I would. It's been a long time and I still haven't actually wanted to pick up the first book in The Expanse. I don't read a ton of military science fiction, although occasionally I will be persuaded to read something that's military SF, usually for awards purposes, and sometimes I'm really pleasantly surprised. On the other side of things, what are the subgenres I keep coming back to? No matter how broadly I read within the genre, I do always come back to folklore and fairy tale inspired fantasy. That's kind of how I got into the genre, and I never really get tired of it. I often keep coming back to Fantasy of Manners as well as a comfort reading niche, but I haven't strayed far from SFF in a long time, and I don't seem likely to anytime soon. So now on to the real question number one. If you made it past that hurdle, if you are looking for an SFF channel that isn't going to be Sanderson all day and all night, I'm sorry. It's just not. It's not gonna be George R.R. Martin or Patrick Rothfuss either. I have read Lord of the Rings, don't worry. But if you've made it that far, question number one is, how do you rate books? Give a quick rundown of how you do your star ratings, or if you don't use star ratings, how you evaluate books. I do use star ratings, though I don't think they're super useful for me in conveying how I actually feel about a book. And I used to feel much better about that back when I was really reliable about getting around to doing wrap-ups and reviews of every book I read in a timely manner on this channel, which hasn't been true for a couple years. So if I don't end up talking about a book in detail in some video or other, that Goodreads star rating might be all you have from me on how I felt about a book, so I really should do some explaining. And by the way, I do post those updates on Goodreads, and I have been cross-posting them to Blue Sky as well, because I know a lot of people don't like Goodreads. So I feel like at this point I am genuinely good enough at figuring out what books I will probably like that the vast majority of the ratings that I give books are 3 or 4 stars. 5 stars are very, very rare for me. 1 and 2 stars, also very, very rare. Even rarer, actually, because honestly, if I am not feeling a book that much, I will likely not finish it, and I won't even, mark it on my shelves as a DNF or anything. It'll just sort of disappear from my life. Either that, or I'll try it again at some point down the road when I feel like I'm in a better mood for whatever it is that book is offering. But a 1 star is something I was hate reading. And I don't enjoy hate reading. And I haven't done it for a long time. I haven't rated anything 1 star for a long time. A 2 star is something I was really deeply disappointed in and do not recommend, but I probably still finished it for some reason other than hate reading. I was, up until a certain point, hoping it would get better, and then, at some point I was past the point of no return and I was just gonna finish the book anyways, or maybe I was even hoping it would get better up until the very end and the ending was just so disappointing. But yeah, I think I had 1 2-star read in all of last year. 3 and 4 is where most of the books that I decide I want to read, that I pick up, I feel like this is the right book for me right now, and I actually make it all the way to the end. Yeah, that's where most of those books are going to be. At 3 stars, I was probably personally a little disappointed in it, but I would still recommend it to certain readers. And 4 stars is the rating that I give most often. I give way more 4-star ratings than any other rating, and it also can mean the widest range of things. There is a huge range of feelings and thoughts that I can have about a book, where I come out of that book thinking, yeah, I'm glad I read that, I had a good time with that, that more or less met my expectations for a book I like. 4 stars almost feels like the default rating for me, which sounds bad. That sounds like I'm just throwing 4-star ratings at books. But honestly, I read a lot of really good books. I think most of them deserve it. And then 5-star books are books that grab me in some special way that often is like deeply personal, that if I had to explain exactly why, I would have to like unearth parts of my soul and shake them around a bit to try and figure it out. And I do sometimes try to do that on camera on this channel. I don't know how successful it is, but I want to try to explain why these books make me feel the way I do. And it's not always totally logical, it's not always totally rational. But I have precious few 5-star reads every year. I had 4 last year. My last video on this channel was the video where I talked about them. My 5-star favorites can be a kind of weird and eclectic bunch. They aren't necessarily books that I would broadly recommend to everyone, but they are books that did something special for me. Question number 2 is, how do you approach reviewing books? And first of all, I want to say that I don't consider the majority of what I do in YouTube video format to be reviewing in the strict sense. I do videos that are called reviews, and those are reviews. Oh, I should read the rest of the question. How do you approach reviewing books? What is your review style? Are you analytical, emotional, casual, or structured? And yeah, if you're talking about like my style of discussing books on YouTube more broadly, that's going to vary a lot based on what sort of video it is. Pretty much the only reason I still do structured book reviews on this channel at all is I kind of feel like I have to do them if I have a review copy of a book, like from NetGalley. And I have gone through periods of time where I just don't request things from NetGalley because I don't want to write reviews. But when I do something that is going to be called a review, I personally feel like I have to put all of my best analytical skills in the thing. I have to put on my thinking cap. I have to dissect the structure and themes of the book and what I think about that and what I think it means about which readers might want to read this book and which ones won't. And for me to feel good about all that work I've done, I have to write it. I have to write it as a written review, which becomes the script of a scripted video. That is why my reviews, my book reviews, are my only scripted videos on the channel. It's why they're so much work, and it's why I don't do very many of them. My series reviews, when I very occasionally post those, however, are not scripted, because that would just be too much work. I far prefer to do recommendation videos or wrap-ups, whether that's, I'm not really doing monthly wrap-ups anymore, but like themed wrap-ups, like I do wrap-ups of the Hugo Award nominees, for example. And I would like to continue to find ways to do more themed wrap-ups on this channel. That's something I want to do. Those are more chatty, unscripted, me sharing my feelings and my thoughts to camera, but I'm okay with the fact that when I'm doing that, I may forget some really important points. I may not manage to convey everything that I think needs to be conveyed to someone who is looking to me as like a definitive resource for whether or not they should read a book. I may miss some things. I may screw some things up when I'm filming. I might get a character's name wrong and have to delete the whole portion of the video where I was talking about that character, and that just has to be fine. I have to give myself that freedom to not be perfect with things that I am choosing not to call reviews, and therefore I don't have to treat them as such, because if I didn't do that, I would stop making content. I wouldn't be able to feel like I was making content up to the standard I was setting for myself, and so I would stop. And then the last place where I'm like talking to camera about books on YouTube that is not a review is the monthly Stitch and Bitch live streams that I do with friends. If you are looking to get like month by month, what have I been reading, that's actually where that content has been for like the past year. And that isn't even just talking to camera, that is discussion, that is back and forth, that is chit chat over crafts and tea. So those live streams happen once a month with occasional special streams. The hosts are me, my friends Rachel of Kalanati, Rhea of the Bookfinch, Diana of Bookish Die, and sometimes Bree of Bree Reads Books. Of those 5 people, I think I might be the only one who's currently regularly still posting to my own BookTube channel right now. We've all had periods of like going on hiatus and coming back. I think I'm the only one who's not on any sort of hiatus at the moment. But we rotate who hosts those streams every month, and all of them are on a playlist. I can link the playlist down below if you want to find it. But of all of the ways that I discuss books on YouTube, like formal review up on top, Stitch and Bitch live show chit chat down on the bottom. But the Stitch and Bitch live show chit chat is where you're actually going to get the monthly updates of what I've been reading. And then the majority of what I like to do on my channel that's in the middle, that are the videos I'm most passionate about, are things like recommendation videos or tags or some sort of themed video, whatever strikes my fancy. And then question number 3, what is the book that made you a reader? Whether it was your first favorite or the one that got you hooked, what book started it all? I have been a reader as long as I could read. I have been a fantasy reader since before I could read. I think my parents read a lot of the sort of children's fantasy classics aloud to me, like night after night, chapter by chapter as bedtime stories, before I was old enough to be able to read that sort of novel on my own. But around first grade was when like the shift happened for me, where I became capable of reading short-ish novels on my own, and I became like an under the bed covers at night when I'm supposed to be asleep with a flashlight reader. And the books that did that for me were the Nancy Drew series. Now, at first grade, these were above my reading level. I did not know a lot of the vocabulary. I was figuring it out from context. But there are 56 of the original Nancy Drew series, and from like first through third grade, I read all of them. My mom would buy them for me and like keep them in a closet and reward me for good behavior with my next Nancy Drew book. It was an entire thing. I had the editions with the yellow spines. I had them all on my bookshelf. I was so proud of them. And obviously that's not indicative of like my current reading preferences, right? That's just ancient Kelsey lore. So question number 4, I already did that one. That was genre niche. And question number 5 is, do you generally prefer character-driven or plot-driven stories? The answer is character-driven. Next question. I suppose I should elaborate. There's obviously a lot of plot going on in a lot of the books that I read because I do read SFF. That's not the reason I read the genre, and it's not what keeps me in the genre, but obviously, like, if I hated plot-driven stories, I would not keep reading exclusively this genre. But the books that I love are much more likely to be character-driven, to be character studies set against this fantasy or science fiction backdrop that feels lived in, that feels fully realized because these people feel real in it. I would say also the dichotomy of character-driven versus plot-driven, I think there are more categories than that. I think there are also idea-driven books, a lot of them in SFF, And then there are kind of like vibes-driven books. And I would say I like all of those character idea vibes more than something that's really plot-focused. Question number 6 is, what's a book that you love so much that you don't care if others don't like it? What's that one book you love enough for everyone? So I think this question is really asking, like, what's a book that you aren't going to feel bad if other people don't like because you know it's very niche and it's for you, and it doesn't have to be for everyone. For me, one of those books, I would say to a certain extent, like most of my favorite books. I talked earlier about most of my 5-star reads being very niche. One of those books for me, one of the all-time big ones, is Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. Obviously, a lot of people love this book. It's very highly acclaimed. It's a modern classic by some standards. But I think there are a lot of people in the online bookish community, especially right now, who are going to be extremely daunted by something this slow. It is exceedingly slow. And this chunky, it is very large. I read this in 2017. I took it very, very slowly. I took months to read this. And like, I'm not sure that if I wanted to read this for the first time today, I'd have a super easy time getting into it. Like, my attention span has changed over the years. I would like to reread this. Like, knowing that I love it and knowing where it's going by the end, I would love to reread this. Please let there be the time someday to reread this book. But I absolutely understand why people are daunted by this. I understand why people going into it looking for, like, something a little more middle of the road for fantasy are going to be wildly put off. I don't judge you if you don't get along with something like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, even though this is the book that I tell people is my favorite book of all time when pressed, even though I haven't read it in a long time. I feel like this book is a respectable answer to that question, whether you're in like SFF circles or like literary circles. You're not going to be judged for that. And it also, it might very well be true. This might actually be my favorite book of all time. And then number 7 is, what's a book that you love so much that if someone doesn't like it, you know your reading tastes don't align. The book or books where a difference of opinion is a strong indicator of different reading preferences. And this one was hard because, as I said, a lot of my favorite books feel very niche to me. So for this one, I am going back to a childhood favorite, and that is The We Free Men by Terry Pratchett. This is the first in the Tiffany Aching series, which is a sub-series of Discworld that's for younger readers. To me, these feel a little less overtly satirical and a little more straightforward and earnest on the surface than the adult Discworld novels that I've read. If you are looking for a place to start with Discworld, and you've heard that The Color of Magic is not the place to start, which I agree with, may I present the Tiffany Aching books because they are absolutely good enough for adults to enjoy them as well. I reread this as an adult in 2016 and loved it just as much, if not more than I did when I was growing up. And I also reread A Hat Full of Sky, which is the second book in this series, and also gave this 5 stars. I meant to continue my reread of the series with Wintersmith and I Shall Wear Midnight, and I just never did. Whoops. So I am due for a reread of Wintersmith and I Shall Wear Midnight. I might just eventually go back and start again from the beginning. I don't know. I don't know what I'm doing there. I don't know what I'm doing with Discworld. I haven't read Discworld in too long and I've forgotten where I was with it. But these books, I feel like I've never heard anyone I've really respected saying that they like 1-star hated them. And if I ever did, I would wonder if that person had a heart. I find it that hard to imagine, like, viscerally hating these books. Number 8 is such a fun question. It's what's in your trash pocket? What are some books, tropes, or themes that you know are bad, but you love them anyway? Thank you for asking. I have an answer to this question that probably isn't quite what the writers of the question had in mind, but once I got it into my head, it was like, no, that's my answer. I am a fantasy reader, and this is a genre that cannot seem to free itself from the concept of hereditary monarchies, and specifically stories about hereditary monarchies where a character who is either the protagonist or you're supposed to really like them and be rooting for them is the heir to the throne, or like someone who has become a monarch, perhaps against their will, but you are rooting for that person because you believe that they're going to be good at the job, or is someone who is in love with someone who is the heir to the throne or is the reigning monarch, like all of these tropes. For the record, I want to make it very clear that I do not think that hereditary monarchies are a good form of government. However, you will have to pry my beloved princesses out of my cold, dead hands. Question number 9 is, do you have any deal breakers in books? Something that, if present, immediately turns you off from a book. And aside from the fact that I'm almost exclusively a single genre reader, so if it's not that, there has to be a really compelling reason for me to pick it up. The longer I have been on the internet talking about books, the fewer and fewer of these I have, because I used to think there were like a lot of things that could be deal breakers for me, and then one by one I have found a book. I'm like, no, except for this one, I like this one. There are a lot of, I guess, sort of romance tropes that I find unsavory that I will tend to steer clear of. Like, romanticized toxic or abusive relationships are kind of a no-go. But beyond that, like, I used to think that vampires were a no, but that now I have a few favorite vampire books. I used to think horror was just out of the question, but I've liked a couple horror books now. I've mentioned military SF. There was a point where I was like, no more military SF for me ever. But then something like last year's Hugo winner, Some Desperate Glory, really impressed me. So I hesitate to like firmly state that I have a lot of deal breakers. What I do have is a very healthy sense of, hey, I'm not interested in this just because there's nothing that actively interests me about a book. Like, it doesn't have to have something that's a deal breaker for me to go, no, I'm not interested, not paying attention to that release. It just has to not have anything that intrigues me, and then I totally ignore the existence of so many books based on just that. Question number 10, what's a strong opinion you have about a book released within the last year? Whether it's overrated, underrated, or just a take you need to share. Okay, so my only 5-star read of the year so far is The City in Glass by Nghi. This was published near the end of last year, I think in November. My hot take is that I desperately want to see this on the Hugo shortlist this year, and I am worried that it's not going to be there. I know Nghi's Singing Hills cycle novellas are really, really popular with Hugo voters. I think this is better than those. It is weirder. It is admittedly way weirder. But this was not on the Nebula shortlist that was just announced recently. I was not happy about that. It seemed like a bad indicator to me of whether or not this is going to end up on the Hugo shortlist. I nominated it. I'm just worried that it's not going to be there, and I really think it should. I think this should be on awards shortlists. This is a book about the rise and fall and rise again of a city in a fantasy world as told from the perspective of a demon who loves and nourishes this city, told non-chronologically, starting at the point at which the city is destroyed by angels. This is about epic grief and cities and how weird they are, and all the people that make them what they are, and I loved it. Question 11 is, what do you look for in writing? What makes a book stand out to you? Is it prose style, themes, voice, structure, or something else? Yes, 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 all of the above. What do I look for in writing? I'm looking for an experience. I want to crack open a book and feel like something about that author's words are taking me into the story and showing me something amazing. And there are so many different ways an author can do that. But for me to say that I loved the writing in a book, I have to feel like I can hear the author's sensibility in that prose. Like, I kind of want to be able to tell who wrote a book. I want to hear something about that author's point of view in the writing, not just in the plot and the collection of tropes that it's presenting to you. Question 12, how do you decide what to read next? Oh dear, oh dearie dear. Do you plan ahead, mood read, or follow external factors, hype, recommendations, arcs? I have increasingly become a mood reader since I started this channel. When I was new to BookTube, I was someone who could really set a TBR and like pick a book to read next. And maybe I wouldn't get through all of the books on the TBR, but I would be able to get through whatever book I picked up and said, I'm gonna read this one. Oh, that is so not true anymore. The worse the world gets out there, the more chaotic the mood reading gets in here. I make no promises at this point in time. That said, I do try to impose some structure on myself, most of which makes me less happy with my reading. I do nominate and vote in the Hugo Awards, and I try really hard to have stuff to nominate by the time nominations close from the past year. They just closed. I've been doing Hugo nomination reading chaotically for the last month or two. I am going to try to participate in the trans rights readathon that's coming up, despite the fact that I still have 3 books that were published last year that I had in progress at the time Hugo nominations closed. I've made no progress on any of those since. And then when the Hugo shortlist is announced, I'm going to spend months reading mostly those books, and the previous books in series that I need to get to those books. And all of this means that I find myself frustratingly stuck year after year in a sort of cycle of spending a large portion of each year reading books published the prior year, either for Hugo nominations or for Hugo voting. And on the one hand, I think it's good, it's keeping me up to date on the genre in some respects. I enjoy being part of the online conversations that happen surrounding each year's nominees, but it also both kind of keeps me from like reading things that are brand shiny new, because I'm often reading books from last year, and it keeps me from reading a lot of the backlist books that I would actually rather be reading 50% of the time or more. It's a struggle. It's always a struggle, and it will not stop being a struggle anytime soon. Question number 13, where do you get inspiration for your BookTube content? What sparks your video ideas? Other creators, trends, personal reading experiences? I do get a lot of my ideas from other content creators. For example, I've done several videos over the years that I've really enjoyed that were book and tea pairings, and that's a video idea that I got from my friend Maya at Maya Reads, who hasn't been posting videos in a very long time, but I'm still doing book and tea pairings. Again, tags I really like. I can get sometimes video ideas from somewhere that'll kind of percolate for a very long time before I end up kind of incorporating it into a video idea that's something else entirely. I always have more ideas for videos than I end up actually making because they are a lot of effort for me. So like just keeping on top of book hauls, some wrap-ups and reviews, some recommendations and tags. I don't totally promise a ton more than that. There is a good deal more than that that I would like to be doing, but it all depends on how much energy I have at any given time. Question number 14, if you could make any book go viral right now, what would it be? A book you think deserves more attention and why? And I'm cheating here because I am not just picking a book, I am picking an author. And the author is Darcie Little Badger, who writes YA contemporary fantasy. I say that holding up the one that's not strictly contemporary because it takes place in the 70s. But I recently read Sheine Lende, which is her most recent release. This is a prequel to Elatsoe. And the reason I didn't say just this book is that I have a hard time envisioning a prequel going viral without the first book going viral first. So like, I need Elatsoe to go viral so that then Sheine Lende can go viral. And if A Snake Falls to Earth gets caught up in that hype machine, that's perfectly fine with me as well. I am constantly caught up in like this sort of love-hate relationship with YA fantasy, as I think a lot of readers who used to love it but have sort of aged out of it find themselves in. I think that's normal. A lot of us go through it. I will admit I'm no longer the target audience for YA, but I also believe that the best YA books will transcend their target audience and be books that adult readers will also enjoy. And I feel like there's a combination of maybe publishing trends and social media trends that right now mean that the books that I feel are the best YA being published right now are flying so far under the radar, and Darcie Little Badger's books are among those for me. I just read this book, and you can read this without reading Elatsoe first. Like, the only part of it that you won't totally be on board with is the epilogue. And I was just struck with how well done the storytelling in this is. These books are both about girls from the same family of Lipan Apache women who, along their matrilineal line, all of them have the ability to summon the ghosts of animals. The protagonist of this book, Sheine, is the grandmother of the protagonist of the first book, Ellie. And these take place in an alternate version of America where some amount of magic is known to exist and is used frequently in society, but it never feels like this grand, epic fantasy world. It all feels very mundane and everyday and familiar. It feels like our world, even though it also has magic. And I was struck reading this recently with how beautifully this book handled the topic of death and loss and family trauma, and how well this kept me engaged beat by beat with a plot that was never really like epic scale stakes. This is a missing person mystery that becomes an underworld quest. And I think Darcie Little Badger is just one of the YA fantasy authors right now who is consistently getting something right and not getting nearly enough recognition for it. And then the last question, number 15, is who are some booktubers with reading tastes similar to yours? Like the creators of this tag, I feel like a lot of my people that I was following on BookTube for so many years that I was and still am friends with just aren't posting videos anymore, and I'm hoping other people will link me to all of their favorite new channels. I do have people I consider BookTube friends who are still posting videos. I'm not sure any of them I would really recommend as like people whose tastes are similar to mine within the genre. They're just other people who also read SFF. Here's the thing, here's a thought I have. I have always, even when I felt like I was like swimming in other content creators on BookTube, I have always felt like the reason I'm still here, the reason I'm making videos, one of the reasons, is because I don't think anyone else has my exact reading taste, right? If there was another content creator who was recommending all the same books I was for all the same reasons, like, why would I be making videos? I would just point you to them. And even at like the heyday of BookTube, I don't know that I've ever felt that there was anyone that my tastes were really, really aligned with at any point in this process. I will say, I do watch videos from both of the creators of this tag, and I think both of them have some overlapping taste with me within the SFF genre, but they both also read a lot of things that aren't SFF. Another channel I recommend, because I think she's making really good content right now, is Angela from Literature Science Alliance. She also follows SFF Book Awards, actually even more than I do. And so she and I end up reading like some overlapping books, but we don't necessarily have the same feelings about them. I will add more people in the description if I think of them while editing. And that's it. That concludes the Get to Know My Taste tag. If you want to get to know my taste a little more, may I recommend my last video? It was my 5-star reads and honorable mentions of 2024. What better place to start? Anyhow, I hope you're having a very nice day. That is all. Bye for now.